10 Royal Murders that Shocked Medieval Europe. Welcome to Creepshow. Today we're stepping into the deadly intrigues of medieval Europe, where the crown was more than a symbol of power. It was a prize for which people killed, betrayed, and schemed. This was an age where ambition often came at the edge of a blade, and family ties offered little protection against jealousy, fear, or vengeance. These stories reveal the blood-stained history of royalty, filled with tales of power-hungry kings, treacherous nobles, and sudden death. Join me as we uncover 10 royal murders that rocked medieval Europe to its very core. Number 10. Erik Thieve of Denmark. The year was 1286, and the small village of Finderup in Denmark was about to bear witness to a shocking crime that would reverberate throughout the kingdom. In the dead of night, a group of men arrived, dressed as Franciscan monks. They moved quietly through the village, their faces obscured in the dim light, making their way toward a barn on the outskirts where Denmark's King Erik Thieve, known as Erik Clipping, lay resting after a day of hunting. Erik and his retinue had sought shelter there, believing themselves safe from harm. But these visitors were not holy men. Underneath their monk robes, they concealed weapons and a dark intent. Slipping into the barn, they surrounded the sleeping king. Suddenly, chaos erupted in a flurry of movement and violence. The assassins plunged their knives into Erik's body, striking him again and again until he lay lifeless, his blood soaking into the straw-covered floor. Before Erik's guards could react, the killers vanished, discarding their monk costumes and disappearing into the night. Erik's murder sent shockwaves through Denmark. As the news spread, people were gripped by fear, anger, and confusion. Erik had not been a beloved ruler. He was a king many had come to fear, a man who had imposed harsh taxes and wielded his power with an iron hand. Nobles and commoners alike resented his heavy-handed rule, viewing him as a tyrant. Under Erik, the Danish crown had seized land, stripped noble families of privileges, and levied crushing taxes to fund military campaigns and solidify the crown's control. This iron-fisted approach earned him no friends among the Danish nobility, yet the sheer audacity of his murder shocked the nation. Suspicion quickly fell on the noble families who had suffered most under Erik's rule. Among them was Stig Andersen Favidi, a nobleman with a reputation for bravery and fierce loyalty to his family. Vida's personal vendetta against Erik was well known. According to rumors, Erik had committed an unforgivable act. He had seduced, or possibly forced himself upon, Vida's wife. The scandal had humiliated Vida and poisoned his relationship with the king. This insult, coupled with Erik's oppressive governance, turned Vida into a prime suspect. But Vida was not the only one with motives. Erik had created a host of enemies among Denmark's aristocracy, many of whom had suffered under his rule. The king's murder took place in an atmosphere thick with distrust, where any number of nobles could have plotted his assassination. Yet, the lack of direct evidence left investigators grasping for answers. In the midst of this uncertainty, the public demanded justice, and Vida became the scapegoat. Convicted without solid proof, Vida's response was defiant. He refused to accept the ruling quietly. Instead, he fled Denmark, escaping to the island of Hjelm, where he transformed from a disgraced nobleman into an outlaw. Stripped of his lands and titles, he turned his fury against the kingdom that had betrayed him, becoming a pirate who terrorized the Danish coast. For 7 years, Vida led a ruthless campaign of raids, attacking merchant ships and coastal settlements, exacting his revenge on the kingdom he once served. Vida's transformation into a pirate was legendary. His defiance captured the imaginations of the people, who saw in him the embodiment of the noble betrayed, a man who fought back against tyranny in his own violent way. Tales of his daring raids spread across Denmark, turning Vida into both a feared and admired figure. a rogue who had dared to stand up to a king, and the kingdom that had wronged him. His story became one of rebellion, a reminder of the dangers that lay in alienating one's closest allies. The murder of Erik V left Denmark in a state of turmoil. The assassination of a king without warning plunged the kingdom into a period of political instability, as the nobility scrambled to fill the power vacuum left by his death. Tensions among noble families grew as suspicions lingered, and the already fragile alliances within the Danish court began to fracture. With the memory of Erik's murder fresh in their minds, the nobles viewed one another with suspicion, each wary of becoming the next target in a world where the quest for power knew no bounds. For the Danish people, the murder became a grim tale, passed down through generations. Some whispered that Erik's ghost haunted Finderup, cursed to relive his final moments as a reminder of the perils of tyranny. Others believed the king's death had ushered in a new era, one where rulers would think twice before imposing their will with unchecked force. The tale of King Erik V's assassination became a story told in hushed tones, a stark reminder of the consequences that even the most powerful could not escape. And in the years that followed, Erik's murder would serve as both a warning and a dark legend, a story of betrayal, revenge, and the fragility of royal power. Number 9. Alboin. Alboin, the fearsome king of the Lombards, was one of the most formidable leaders of 6th century Europe. Known for his military prowess, Alboin led the Lombards in a sweeping conquest of northern Italy, carving out a new kingdom with force and ruthlessness. To his followers, he was a hero, a warrior king whose strength could not be matched on the battlefield. But Alboin's ferocity wasn't limited to his enemies. He harbored a streak of cruelty that would ultimately seal his own fate. Earlier in his reign, Alboin's aggression had led him to a bitter war with the Gepids, a neighboring tribe. During the conflict, Alboin fought and killed their king, Cunimund, and, as a grotesque symbol of his victory, had Cunimund's skull hollowed out and fashioned into a drinking cup. To make matters darker, Alboin forced Cunimund's daughter, Rosamund, into marriage. She had lost her father and her people to this warrior king, and now she was made to be his wife, a union forged in blood and humiliation. But Alboin's callousness toward Rosamund did not end there. In June of 572, during a grand feast in Pavia, Alboin, drunk and reveling, called for his ghastly drinking cup, the skull of Rosamund's father. In a twisted act of cruelty, he held it out to her and commanded that she drink happily with her father. Humiliated, enraged, and unable to bear her suffering any longer, Rosamund resolved to seek revenge against her husband, the king. Her plan was audacious and dangerous. She carefully disguised herself as a servant and seduced Perideo, one of Alboin's most trusted bodyguards. Once she had won him over, Rosamund revealed her true identity, making it clear that the encounter was no accident. She threatened to reveal their affair to Alboin unless Perideo agreed to help her execute her revenge. Perideo knew Alboin would show no mercy if he learned of the betrayal, so he reluctantly agreed to her demands, knowing he had no way out. That night, the plot unfolded. In the darkness of the royal bedchamber, Perideo entered and approached the sleeping king. With a swift, brutal strike, he drove his weapon into Alboin, killing the mighty warrior king as he lay defenseless. Rosamund's plan had succeeded. Her father's death was avenged, and Alboin's reign ended not on the battlefield but by betrayal in his own bed. The assassination of Alboin sent shockwaves through the Lombard kingdom. His death left the kingdom in turmoil, sparking a period of uncertainty and political instability. The people of the kingdom, who had once revered Alboin as an invincible warrior, found themselves leaderless and vulnerable. His brutal, unrepentant nature had forged his power, but it had also marked his downfall, undone by the very cruelty he had once wielded without a second thought. For Rosamund, the murder of Alboin was both a victory and a curse. Though she had avenged her father, her role in Alboin's assassination did not go unnoticed. Her life spiraled into further treachery and danger as powerful figures sought to seize control in the power vacuum left by Alboin's death. Her fate, like that of her husband's, was dark and uncertain, but she would forever be remembered as the woman who dared to bring down a king. The story of Alboin is one of brutality, revenge, and the fragile nature of power. His death at the hands of those closest to him became a lasting tale, a reminder that even the strongest warriors are not immune to the consequences of their own cruelty. Number 8. Andrew of Hungary. In 1343, the Kingdom of Naples faced an uncertain future. King Robert of Naples had passed away, leaving the throne to his young and ambitious granddaughter Joanna. This inheritance came with an unusual arrangement. Joanna was married to her cousin, Prince Andrew of Hungary, and it was widely expected that he would rule Naples alongside her. But Joanna, fiercely independent and determined, had other plans. To her, she alone was the true ruler of Naples, while Andrew was merely her consort. Andrew, however, had grown up in Hungary's royal court, where his expectations were vastly different. He believed that his marriage to Joanna entitled him to full authority over Naples. But Andrew soon found himself isolated. Joanna's court and the Neapolitan public viewed Andrew as an outsider and distrusted his entourage of Hungarian advisors, perceiving them as a foreign influence on their kingdom. Naples rallied behind Joanna as their rightful ruler, viewing her husband's ambitions as a threat to the stability of their kingdom. The tension between Joanna and Andrew grew, spilling over into the court, where factions formed, each loyal to one side. As Andrew became increasingly aware of the hostility toward him, his anxiety grew. His letters home to his mother, Queen Elizabeth of Hungary, were filled with fear and suspicion. He expressed his isolation and distress, confiding that he was surrounded by enemies and felt his life was in danger. His pleas, however, went unheeded. Then, in 1344, Andrew's worst fears were realized. One night, as he was undressing for bed, a group of armed men burst into his bedchamber, ambushing him. They beat him mercilessly, leaving him dazed and barely conscious. The attackers then slipped a noose around his neck, dragged him to a balcony, and attempted to hang him. But the noose, hastily placed, failed to tighten properly, leaving Andrew struggling for breath. Realizing he was still alive, some of the assassins grabbed his legs, pulling down to ensure the deed was done. The brutality of the attack was shocking, even in a kingdom accustomed to political violence. The assassins had planned to make Andrew's murder appear as an accident, perhaps even a suicide, and hoped to conceal his death. But their plan fell apart when Andrew's childhood nurse, alerted by the noise, rushed to his quarters. Finding Andrew's lifeless body, she screamed, raising an alarm that quickly brought servants and guards to the scene. The news of his violent death spread like wildfire, and the court of Naples was thrown into an uproar. Suspicion immediately fell on Joanna. Many in the court, as well as Andrew's family in Hungary, believed that she had orchestrated the murder to rid herself of her inconvenient husband. Joanna claimed innocence, stating she had been asleep in the next room, unaware of the grisly events unfolding. But her denial did little to quell the rumors, and the court was soon divided. Some continued to support Joanna, convinced that her innocence and right to rule outweighed any doubts. Others saw her as a dangerous, ambitious figure willing to go to any lengths, even murder, to consolidate her power. The scandal quickly escalated into a diplomatic crisis. Queen Elizabeth of Hungary, enraged by her son's murder, demanded justice, and Hungary called for an investigation into the events surrounding Andrew's death. The murder had ignited a political storm, plunging Naples into turmoil. Joanna's grip on the throne became precarious as Hungarian envoys arrived, intent on avenging the fallen prince. Despite Joanna's claims of innocence, the murder of Prince Andrew cast a long shadow over her reign. For the remainder of her life, the accusations lingered, and her reputation was forever marred. Naples, too, suffered under the weight of the scandal, as the court fractured further, and foreign powers questioned Joanna's legitimacy. The story of Andrew's murder became one of the most infamous royal assassinations of medieval Europe, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and a young queen's deadly struggle for autonomy. The scandal would haunt Joanna's rule and serve as a reminder of the dangers that lay in royal marriages, where love and loyalty could be buried under the quest for power. Number 7. Joanna of Naples. The life of Joanna of Naples was one of intrigue, resilience, and tragedy. She ascended to the throne of Naples as a teenager, but her reign was overshadowed by the scandal and violence that plagued her marriage to Prince Andrew of Hungary. In 1345, Andrew was brutally murdered, and suspicions immediately fell on Joanna, who had fiercely resisted his attempts to rule Naples as her equal. Though she denied involvement, the shadow of Andrew's murder haunted her, and the consequences of his death soon spiraled out of control. Andrew's family, the powerful Hungarian royals, were outraged. They saw his murder as an insult to their dynasty and a crime demanding vengeance. Under the leadership of Andrew's older brother, Hungary launched a forceful invasion determined to bring Joanna to justice, or at least depose her. But Joanna was as politically shrewd as she was resilient. She managed to stave off the invasion, eventually reclaiming her throne and solidifying her control over Naples. Though she held on to her crown, the murder of Andrew left lasting suspicions, and her reputation in Europe was forever tarnished. Yet, while she may have secured her rule in the short term, her Hungarian enemies were not finished with her. They waited, watching as Naples endured years of political tension and power struggles. Then, in 1380, the Hungarian court saw their opportunity. Pope Urban VI, one of two popes in a schism dividing the Catholic Church, granted the throne of Naples to Charles of Durazzo, a distant relative of Joanna's and a Hungarian favorite. Eager to capitalize on this support, Charles amassed an army, invaded Naples, and successfully captured Joanna, forcing her from the throne. But Joanna wasn't prepared to surrender without a fight. In a final act of defiance, she announced the adoption of Prince Louis of France as her heir and successor, a move that would complicate Charles' claim and bring a powerful ally to her side. The decision delighted Louis, who immediately began gathering a large French army to rescue his newfound mother and reinstate her as queen. Joanna's act of defiance proved she was a true strategist, her mind sharp even as she faced defeat. Her message was clear. She would not go quietly. But before the French army could reach Naples, tragedy struck. In 1382, Joanna was assassinated under the orders of Charles of Durazzo. The exact method of her murder remains shrouded in mystery, but most accounts claim she was strangled, echoing the fate of her late husband Andrew, who had been killed in a similar manner nearly 4 decades earlier. Other sources, however, suggest a more delicate but equally brutal death. Charles's assassins reportedly smothered her with a feather mattress, a method that would leave no visible marks on her body, making it appear that she had passed peacefully. Joanna's death marked the end of one of the most turbulent reigns in European history, a life marked by scandal, resilience, and political cunning. Her choice to adopt Prince Louis as her heir sent ripples across the continent, sparking tension between France and Hungary that would play out long after her death. Her story, which began with promise, ended in betrayal, reflecting the perilous nature of power in medieval Europe. Joanna of Naples left a complex legacy. To some, she was a queen who fought fiercely for her autonomy and the survival of her throne. defying traditional norms and carving her path through a male-dominated political landscape. To others, she remained a figure clouded by suspicion, her role in Andrew's murder never fully absolved. Her life and death became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how ruthless ambition, loyalty, and vengeance were often entwined, each as deadly as the other in the cutthroat world of medieval royalty. Number 6. Charles of Durazzo. Charles of Durazzo's path to power was littered with betrayal and bloodshed, driven by ambition that knew no bounds. In 1382, his ascent to the throne of Naples began with a deadly betrayal. Charles orchestrated the murder of Queen Joanna, his distant relative, who had ruled Naples since she was a teenager. Though their family ties should have united them, Charles saw Joanna's rule as an opportunity to be seized. She was aging and embroiled in controversy, and Charles knew her enemies would rally around him. When Joanna was assassinated under mysterious circumstances, Charles moved quickly to claim the throne, declaring himself the new king of Naples. Charles's plan to rule Naples had depended on removing Joanna's adopted heir, Prince Louis of France, a powerful rival. But fortune seemed to favor him. Louis died of illness, conveniently removing the last immediate threat to Charles's rule. With Joanna and Louis gone, Charles's reign over Naples seemed secure. But for a man like Charles, Naples was only the beginning. Charles soon set his sights on Hungary, a kingdom that had recently been thrown into turmoil by the death of its king, Louis III of Hungary. The Hungarian crown passed to his young daughter Mary, whose rule was tenuous and vulnerable to challengers. Charles, who had found success in claiming power from one female relative, believed Hungary could be his next conquest. To him, Mary was little more than an inexperienced queen whose throne he could take, just as he had taken Joanna's. But Charles underestimated both Mary's resolve and the loyalty of her mother, Elizabeth of Bosnia. Elizabeth was a seasoned political operator who had already secured the throne of Poland for her elder daughter Jadwiga. Fiercely protective of Mary and Hungary's throne, she recognized the threat Charles posed and was determined to safeguard her daughter's rule. But Elizabeth knew that to defeat a man as ruthless as Charles, she would need more than open confrontation. She needed to outsmart him. Charles invaded Hungary and deposed Mary, successfully installing himself as king. Yet Elizabeth, cunning and adaptable, feigned submission to Charles, offering gestures of loyalty and even residing with him in Buda Castle to prove her allegiance. Charles believed he had subdued the Hungarian queen mother and allowed himself to relax, unaware that Elizabeth's loyalty was a charade. She had a plan, and all she needed was the right moment to strike. As the days passed, Elizabeth quietly set her scheme in motion. She placed her trust in an assassin loyal to her cause, ensuring that he would strike decisively. Finally, the moment arrived. While Charles was resting in Buda Castle, still unaware of the trap, Elizabeth's assassin approached him and, with swift brutality, buried a hatchet in his neck. Charles, the ambitious king who had seized 2 thrones by force, was dead before he even understood what had happened. Elizabeth's cunning and patience had won the day, and the Hungarian throne was now firmly secured for her daughter Mary. However, Charles's allies would not let Elizabeth's actions go unpunished. Charles's wife, heartbroken and vengeful, soon retaliated. Seizing Elizabeth, she ordered her execution in revenge for her husband's murder. Elizabeth was strangled, much like Charles's earlier victims, in a bitter twist of fate that marked the end of her life, but solidified her daughter's rule. The death of Charles of Durazzo was a turning point in Hungary's history, ending one of the bloodiest and most ruthless bids for power Europe had ever seen. His assassination marked the end of a turbulent chapter, and Mary, bolstered by her mother's sacrifice, was left to rule Hungary. The story of Charles of Durazzo became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the lethal mix of ambition, betrayal, and revenge that lurked within the courts of medieval Europe. Number 5. Sarovich Dimitri. The tragic and mysterious death of Sarovich Dimitri, youngest son of Ivan the Terrible, is one of Russia's most haunting tales, marked by political intrigue, suspicion, and the fierce struggle for power that shaped his legacy. Ivan the Terrible's family was plagued by tragedy and violence. His first son drowned as an infant when the royal boat capsized, and his second son, Ivan Ivanovich, was killed by Ivan himself in a fit of rage. This left the throne to Ivan's third son, Fyodor, who was believed to have limited mental capacity. As a result, real power passed to the ambitious and cunning Boris Godunov, Fyodor's regent, who effectively ruled Russia. Dmitri, Ivan's youngest son, stood as a potential threat to Godunov's authority. Although just a child, Dmitri represented an alternative line to the throne, one that could jeopardize Godunov's control if Fyodor were to die. Recognizing this threat, Godunov knew Dmitri's presence complicated his ambitions, and to no one's surprise, Dmitri soon met a suspicious end. In 1591, Dmitri was found dead, his throat slashed by a knife, despite being only 8 years old. Godunov's court hastily declared the death an accident, claiming that Dmitri had suffered an epileptic seizure while playing with a knife, fatally wounding himself. Yet, few accepted this version of events. The story strained belief, and rumors of foul play spread rapidly. The official story became even less convincing when a crucial witness who was set to testify about Dmitri's death mysteriously disappeared, further fueling public suspicion. Accusations began to fall upon the Bytygovsky family, who had been close to Dmitri. A riot ensued, and in a wave of fury, the Bytygovsky family was killed as the people demanded justice for their young Sarovich. But Dmitri's tale did not end with his tragic death. In the years that followed, 3 separate men emerged across Russia, each claiming to be the true Dmitri who had escaped assassination. Known as the false Dimitris, these impostors amassed substantial followings, each asserting that they were the real Dmitri, saved from Godunov's plot and returning to claim their rightful place on the throne. The first of these pretenders, false Dmitri the Firster, gained significant support and even married into the Polish nobility, nearly securing himself as ruler before meeting a violent end. For the Russian people, Dmitri's story became more than just the murder of a young boy. It became a symbol of resistance. To many, Dmitri represented innocence lost to political greed and a rightful heir stolen from his people. His tragic story became a rallying cry against Boris Godunov's rule, sparking widespread unrest that would plunge Russia into the infamous Time of Troubles. The memory of Sarovich Dimitri, the young heir whose life was cut short, remains woven into Russia's history as a powerful reminder of the lengths some would go to for power, and the lasting impact of a life stolen too soon. His death, and the waves of turmoil that followed, underscore the brutality and intrigue of royal succession in medieval Russia, a tale of innocence and ambition that would haunt Russian history for centuries. Number 4. Aedh ou Conchobair. Not all royal murders were the result of political conspiracies or battles for power. The tale of Aedh ou Conchobair, king of Connacht, reveals a different, more personal kind of tragedy. Ruling in the west of Ireland during the early 13th century, Aedh was a notable figure, renowned not just for his power, but for his striking looks and charisma. His charm and reputation for attracting admirers made him a subject of gossip, but it would also become the cause of his untimely death. In 1228, Aedh visited Geoffrey de Morisco, the English justiciar of Ireland, at his residence. The annals of Connaught, which chronicle his death, reveal a scene that began in hospitality but soon turned to fatal jealousy. Geoffrey, eager to impress his royal guest, ordered a servant woman to attend to Aedh and prepare his bath. She was to bathe him, a gesture meant to show respect and offer comfort to the visiting king. But Aedh's reputation for handsomeness and the close proximity of the servant fueled a dangerous jealousy in her husband, a carpenter in Geoffrey's service. Consumed by anger and suspicion, the carpenter stormed into the bath chamber, axe in hand. In a fit of rage, he struck Aedh multiple times, killing him where he lay, defenseless. The shocking murder of a king, especially in such a personal setting, threw the household into chaos. Geoffrey, horrified and desperate to restore order, had the carpenter hanged the very next day. However, the annals record a darker twist to this tragic story. According to the chroniclers, Geoffrey's own son had played a role in stoking the carpenter's jealousy, deliberately planting doubts and rumors to inflame his anger. It appears Geoffrey's son had his own reasons to wish Aedh gone, perhaps seeing the king as a potential rival or threat to his own ambitions. In a time when Ireland was navigating both internal conflicts and the encroaching influence of English rule, a powerful figure like Aedh could have easily unsettled the balance of alliances and loyalties, making him inconvenient to some in the English court. Despite this, Aedh's death stands apart from typical political assassinations of the time. The carpenter's brutal response, driven by jealousy rather than political maneuvering, reveals the deeply human passions that could disrupt even royal lives. The aftermath of Aedh's murder would have rippled through Connaught and beyond, marking the end of a charismatic and influential ruler whose death left a stain on the relationship between the Irish nobility and the English authorities. The carpenter's swift execution may have provided Geoffrey a sense of justice, but the truth of the situation, his own son's role in instigating the murder, remained hidden in the annals. Aedh Ua Conchobair's story endures as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of medieval life, where alliances, suspicions, and passions often clashed in ways that led to unexpected tragedy. His death, recounted through the annals of Connaught, underscores that, in medieval Ireland, even the fate of a king could be sealed not by grand politics or rival kings, but by personal emotions and the jealousy of an ordinary man. Number 3. Charles the Good. The story of Charles the Good, Count of Flanders, is one of loyalty, charity, and tragic betrayal. Charles came to power under dramatic circumstances when his cousin, Count Baldwin, was mortally wounded in battle. Baldwin, childless and facing death, named Charles his successor with his dying breath. Charles, the son of Canute IV of Denmark, accepted his cousin's wishes and returned to Flanders to take up the mantle of Count. Once installed as Count of Flanders, Charles quickly proved his worth. Known for his piety and compassion, he dedicated himself to improving the lives of his people. Charles became renowned for his acts of charity, providing food and support for the poor and ensuring justice was served throughout his realm. His benevolence and devotion earned him the title the Good, and he became beloved by his subjects. But, in medieval Europe, even a good ruler couldn't escape the dangers of ambition, power struggles, and jealousy. One powerful family, the Arembalds, saw Charles' rule as a threat to their own influence. The Arembalds had risen to power under shadowy and scandalous circumstances. The family patriarch, a serf who served as an attendant to the Castellan of Bruges, had plotted his ascent with ruthless cunning. According to local legend, he seduced the Castellan's wife, secretly securing influence over her. One day, when the Castellan was relieving himself over the side of a boat, the Arembald patriarch seized the moment. He pushed his master into the water, drowning him. With the path to power now clear, he married the Castellan's widow, taking over her late husband's position and establishing the Arembald line. Over generations, the Arembald family expanded its influence and wealth, climbing to new heights in Flemish society. However, Charles, guided by a commitment to justice, decided it was time to address what he saw as the illegitimacy of their power. In 1127, Charles took bold action. He declared that the Arembalds should be returned to their original status as serfs, effectively stripping them of the titles and privileges they had gained. This decision infuriated the Arembald family, who saw their entire legacy and future at risk. Driven by desperation and a deep fear of losing everything, the Arembalds devised a plan to remove Charles permanently. On a cold morning in March 1127, Charles was praying alone at the Church of Saint Donation in Bruges, his mind far from the dangers lurking within his own court. The Arembalds had dispatched a group of knights, armed and determined to carry out their deadly plot. Breaking the sanctity of the church, the knights entered quietly and moved toward the Count as he knelt in prayer. In a brutal attack, they struck him down, knocking his brains out onto the floor. Charles's murder shocked Flanders to its core. Killing a ruler was one thing, but to slaughter him in the holy setting of a church was a blasphemous act that enraged his people. News of the murder spread quickly, and the response from his subjects was swift and fierce. The Arembald family, once powerful, found themselves surrounded by angry citizens who had revered Charles as a compassionate and just leader. In the days following his assassination, the people of Flanders rose up against the Arembalds, storming their castles, seizing their estates, and ending their reign in a wave of fury and retribution. Many members of the Arembald family met violent ends, and those who survived were exiled, their power and influence in Flanders shattered. Charles the Good's legacy lived on long after his death. For the people of Flanders, he became a martyr, a ruler who had fought for justice and who had paid the ultimate price for his dedication to integrity. His story became legend, a tale of a ruler who faced the consequences of challenging powerful forces, but who did so with the welfare of his people in mind. The murder of Charles the Good stands as a powerful reminder of the volatility of medieval power, where even the most beloved rulers could fall victim to the ambitions of others. His life, marked by charity, and his death, marked by treachery, offer a lasting lesson on the fragile nature of power, loyalty, and justice. Number 2. Canut Arur. The tale of Canute IV, King of Denmark, is one of devotion, ambition, and ultimately, violent rebellion. A pious man, Canute dedicated himself to expanding the influence of Christianity across Denmark, working closely with the Church to suppress lingering pagan practices. His commitment to religion and reform earned him a reputation as a devout leader, and his efforts to strengthen the Church eventually led to his canonization as Saint Canute. Yet, despite his dedication, Canute's fervent faith and policies alienated his subjects and set the stage for a brutal end. As a devout Christian, Canute sought to elevate the Church's role within Denmark, enforcing laws that required peasants to pay a tithe to support its work. This demand struck a nerve with the Danish people, especially with the lower classes, who saw the tithe as an unjust burden imposed by a king who, despite his religious piety, seemed increasingly out of touch with their hardships. To make matters worse, Canute launched a campaign for an ambitious invasion of England, envisioning himself as a conqueror of lands beyond Denmark's shores. However, infighting among Danish nobles and logistical failures quickly derailed these plans, which not only embarrassed Canute, but also left his subjects resentful of the tax burdens they bore in vain. By 1086, frustration over the tithes and Canute's failed military campaigns had boiled over into open rebellion. Danish peasants and disillusioned nobles alike united against their king, sparking a powerful uprising that spread rapidly across the kingdom. The rebellion grew so intense that Canute found himself retreating from his own people, taking refuge in a church at Odense, along with his loyal men. The church, a sacred place of sanctuary, became his last refuge. Yet, as the rebellion reached the church's doors, even the sanctity of this holy space couldn't shield him from his enemies' wrath. Inside the church, surrounded by a small group of loyal followers, Canute prayed, hoping for divine intervention. But outside, the furious rebels gathered, their patience exhausted. One rebel, aiming through a window, hurled a spear at the praying king, piercing him and breaking the silence of the sanctuary. In a frenzy, the mob then broke down the church door and surged inside, showering Canute with arrows in a deadly barrage, ensuring his end. The murder of Canute IV sent shockwaves through Denmark, and the church quickly moved to preserve his legacy. Canute was later canonized as Saint Canute, celebrated as a martyr who had died for his faith and the church's cause. However, his canonization did little to erase the anger that had simmered among the peasants and nobility who had turned against him. His rule was remembered both as a period of religious dedication and as a cautionary tale of how devotion to an ideal, unchecked by compassion for the people, can lead even the most righteous ruler to ruin. Canute IV's death became legendary, a story of faith, ambition, and the dangers of isolating oneself from one's subjects. His tragic end in the church at Odense stood as a reminder of the thin line between religious devotion and oppression, leaving a complicated legacy in Danish history. Number 1. Galswintha, Sigebert, and Chilperic. In the turbulent courts of 6th century Frankish kings, Fredegund's name became synonymous with ambition and brutality. She began her life in the lowest ranks, as a slave in the court of King Chilperic Thras of Neustria, but Fredegund possessed an intense charm and intelligence that quickly set her apart. Her beauty and wit captured the king's attention, elevating her from servant to mistress. Yet Fredegund had no intention of being simply a king's mistress. She wanted to rule alongside him. Only one person stood in her way: Queen Galswintha, Chilperic's wife. Determined to secure her place, Fredegund manipulated events to remove her rival. Soon, Galswintha met a violent end, strangled under mysterious circumstances. Fredegund swiftly assumed her place, marrying Chilperic and taking the throne as queen. But Galswintha's death was not without consequence. Her sister, Brunhild, was married to Chilperic's brother, Sigebert, king of Austrasia. Furious and heartbroken, Brunhilde demanded vengeance for her sister's murder, and Sigebert vowed to fulfill her demand. Sigebert rallied his forces, launching a war against Chilperic to avenge Galswintha. Sigebert initially triumphed on the battlefield, pushing Chilperic to the edge of defeat. But Fredegund, ever resourceful and unflinching, found a way to turn the tide. Just as Sigebert seemed poised for victory, she orchestrated his assassination. Her agents struck in the midst of his triumph, ensuring that her husband's life and her own position were safe. This murder solidified the enmity between Fredegund and Brunhild, setting the stage for one of the most infamous blood feuds in medieval history. Over the next 3 decades, Fredegund became notorious for her extensive network of assassinations and violent plots. She orchestrated multiple attempts on Brunhilde's life, each more elaborate than the last. Yet Brunhilde managed to survive, proving a resilient and worthy opponent. Their feud became legendary, a bitter struggle between 2 powerful women, each determined to see the other fall. Fredegund's killing spree extended far beyond her rivalry with Brunhilde. Her list of victims grew, including nearly anyone she perceived as a threat to her power. She ordered the murders of several of Chilperic's sons from previous marriages to prevent them from challenging her own son's claim to the throne. Bishops, nobles, and influential members of the court were all targeted in her ruthless bid to consolidate power. Many even suspected that Fredegund orchestrated the death of her own husband, Chilperic, who was mysteriously murdered in 584. Fredegund's ambition wasn't limited to removing rivals. she actively influenced policy to win the favor of the people. In an astute political move, she convinced Chilperic to lower taxes, securing loyalty and support from the population. Her actions bolstered her position and helped ensure her son, Clothar II, would inherit the throne after Chilperic's death. Following Chilperic's murder, Fredegund navigated the perilous world of court politics with unwavering determination. Her careful alliances, manipulation of court dynamics, and ruthless eliminations allowed her to defend her power and secure her son's future. When Clothar II ultimately ascended to the throne, it was in large part due to the groundwork laid by his mother, a queen who defied all expectations, surviving and thriving in a male-dominated realm through sheer cunning and resilience. Fredegund's life left an indelible mark on Frankish history, transforming her from a slave into one of the most formidable queens of her time. Her legacy is remembered for her relentless ambition, her unyielding ruthlessness, and her ability to wield influence in a world of powerful men. The tale of Fredegund is a complex reminder of the extremes to which royal ambition could drive those who sought the throne, cementing her as one of the most formidable and feared figures of the early medieval world. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark heart of medieval royalty. These brutal tales remind us that behind the splendor and ceremony of the crown often lay a world steeped in blood, betrayal, and ambition. If these stories intrigued or unsettled you, let me know in the comments which one left the deepest impression, or if there's another royal mystery or murder you'd like to see us explore next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a look into history's sinister shadows. Until next time, remember, sometimes power comes with a price too high to pay.